Hello. Today I'm going to present my understanding of my generation and the prevalence of social justice advocates and where they've come from. Now, this is going to predominantly focus on the social justice advocates side of things, and I'm going to refer to them as advocates because I come from a very long line of warriors, and let me tell you, these fucking people are not warriors. Now, I was attempting to write from a bullet point perspective, but frankly, I gave up on it because it's a much deeper and much broader subject than I originally gave it credit for. So, this is a fully written script with some off-the-cuff remarks that will be interjected in between. So, simply put, the rise in social justice can be explained with the statement that God is dead and we have killed him. You're probably wondering how Nietzsche fits into this whole affair. He doesn't, not directly anyway. The idea that God is dead and we have killed him relates to our relationship with science and rational discourse. We have effectively killed, quote-unquote, the need for a God by explaining the world around us, by delving into reality head first, and attempting to present our findings in an objective manner, to describe the natural world around us, and to remove any illusions, any doubts about how it all functions. This growing secularism is a net positive for society in some ways, but a negative in others. That being said, before I move on, I feel the need to explain that I am not a religious man. Not by any stretch. I do not ascribe to any religious ideology, and I'm vehemently opposed to at least one of them. Most of them are alright, and serve to curb part of the nihilism that Nietzsche predicted. Nihilism seems particularly present in my generation, the millennials. We were raised under the notion that we would be great and we would find success, and that if we followed the same path that everyone else was told to follow, we would find happiness, purpose, success, better life than our parents had. And instead we have a rising obesity epidemic, a piss-poor global economy, a ton of people with various degrees and nonsense from various colleges, massive debt, a ton of apathy, and best of all, a rise in the social justice advocates and communists. Let's focus on those two, shall we? As for social justice warriors and where they come from, it's academia. Full stops. Our parents were either blissfully unaware or simply didn't care that academia was going south something fierce. Or, well, technically it was going north by northwest on the political compass, by which I mean far into the authoritarian sphere and deep into left country. So we're talking like full-blown communism. Ultimately, they're communists. They want a system of government and distribution centralized around the political elite in an attempt to push this concept forward. So in comes the concept of social justice, which is just a pretty way of saying government-controlled redistribution of X. Does that sound conspiratorial? Well, maybe, but I can prove it. The idea of social justice is predicated on the idea that certain injustices have occurred in the past and need to be rectified in the present. It focuses wholly on populism. Ironically enough, they themselves rail against populism all the time. But namely the idea that the people know best and the people have been harmed and the state must help to rectify that harm, disregarding what any experts might have to say on the matter. In fact, just to be 100% clear, let's look at the definition of populism real quick according to Wikipedia. Literally the first sentence of which states, populism is a political doctrine that proposes that the common people are exploited by a privileged elite and which seeks to resolve this. Now that sounds like patriarchy to me. You know, that nebulous concept of just, the patriarchy controls everything, dun dun dun. We have to rail against it. Or, if we're going to put it in politically correct terms, it sounds like the concept of the rich, white, cis, hetero male. You know, it's almost like artery clogging saturated fats. It's become one word. Rich, white, cis, hetero, male. If you're one of those, you are literally the devil to these people. Now, moving on. When we go from there into how they attempt to push their belief system, they create an elite class and an everyone else. How? Well, whites versus people of color. But we have to specify it's only the men that are at fault. The women can do no wrong. Remember that. By creating this dichotomy, you effectively allow any non-white to be a perpetual victim who can therefore do no wrong. You can't hold them accountable because they're always a victim. They're always being oppressed. Every action they do is a revolutionary action because they're the oppressed minority. Do you ever wonder why it's always women and minorities that are always up in people's faces during protests? You know, it's almost never a white guy. Occasionally you'll get the Carl the Cuck dude who's, "You're a fucking white male!" Like, if that's an argument, you know? Or Sui Park back in the day, where she told that journalist, "I wouldn't expect a white male to understand," and just, oh boy. But that's where this stems from. They're given power over others by virtue of being an oppressed class of people. It's empowering to them to scream and rail against the system that's in place because it is supposedly set up to make them fail at the cost of raising the privileged people, namely the aforementioned, here we go again, say it with me now, rich, white, cis, hetero, male. Fuck, I'm supposed to clap in between each of those, aren't I? Damn. There are clear examples of this bullshit being spread across the parties, particularly those with left-leaning ideas. Bernie, if you're white, you cannot understand what it is to be poor. Sanders, as an example. And the Democratic Party as a whole. So why is it so popular and seeming to grow in power? Because it preys upon a handful of basic psychological tenets. Namely, humans seek purpose in a cold, uncaring universe. The concept of God gives them purpose, which in turn allows them to be good people. It's a lot less lonely to think of yourself as a tool of God meant for some purpose only He sees and imparts upon you at the time that you are needed. It gives your every action meaning. It gives everyday purpose. It creates a happy medium for people. In our growing secular society, we remove God and present the idea of social justice. Your purpose is to be an advocate of social justice, to right the wrongs of inequality and attempt to fix the problems. Or, if you're one of the white guilt types, then your purpose is to be a good ally, which is a term so fucking nebulous I'm not even going to begin to try and describe it here. Both of those in turn prey upon the notion that all humans, every single one of us, sees ourselves as good people. We have evidence to support as much, going back quite a ways. You can see examples of men and women who have been disgusting criminals. I mean, like killing in cold blood, taking countless lives by their own hands. And if you sit down and read their writings, they never consider themselves to be morally objectionable. I believe, not Al Pacino, but the guy he was supposed to be representing was quoted as saying, he has something of a bum's life. All he does is try and do good for people, and this is the lot he gets. So, I mean, even he couldn't see himself as being an evil person. I guarantee you Hitler didn't wake up every morning and think, how am I going to ruin people's lives today? No, he considered himself to be someone who was advocating for the benefits of his people. No one can really live with the idea that they're not good people. It demoralizes us and inevitably leads to either depression, suicide, or an attempt at reformation, which is why a lot of prison inmates will turn to various religions. Some good, some disgusting. Now, why is this dangerous and needs to be stopped? Well, if you're a regular viewer of mine, then I have to assume you know why social justice is bad. If you're not, here's why it's bad. It promotes equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. It promotes racist ideas and pushes for a deeper racial divide. It promotes hatred by demonizing an entire section of the population as literally the devil. Every issue was their fault, and every victim was a victim of the patriarchy. Or rich, cis, het, white men. It becomes a polarizing us versus them dichotomy. That's not even getting into the ethical concerns, moral concerns, or anything else of that nature. It simply analyzes it from as close to an unbiased perspective as I can offer. To summarize, the rise in social justice stems from academia. It's disturbing and disgusting to watch it grow. It has such a strong foothold for a few reasons. Namely, it's easier to blame someone else for your lack of success, for your failure. It's easier to point the finger at people and say, it's their fault my life sucks. We all have a need for a purpose, and the nebulous goals of social justice movement mean that one can never truly win the battle, thereby giving these people a purpose that lasts several lifetimes, much like religion. It stems from the idea that nihilism is the inevitable conclusion one comes to after accepting that our lives are meaningless. So, how do you counter it? By promoting rugged individualism, by stopping this ridiculous romanticization of our society, and by not comparing our individual success with that of others. Life doesn't happen in a vacuum. But more on that later, because this video is already starting to drag on. I'm JP from Counterpoint, and I hope this video was at least a little enlightening. I look forward to hearing from you down in the comments below. Hope you all have a nice day.